Part 1.
You will hear Kevin Brown asking for information about renting an apartment through an agency. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now the test will begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, as you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good afternoon. How can I help you?
Hello, my name's Kevin Brown. I saw your advertisement in today's local paper, apartments to let in all areas of the city.
Yes, Mr. Brown. We currently have several properties available. What part of the city were you thinking of?
Well, city centre ideally.
OK. And what price range are you interested in?
I don't really know. What have you got?
Well, prices start at £400 a month, going up to £1,000 a month.
OK. And what's the difference? What does the price depend on?
Well, the number of bedrooms mainly.
Uh-huh.
The cheaper apartments have 1 bedroom, while the most expensive have 3 or 4 bedrooms.
OK. 2 bedrooms would be nice. So I'll say 2 bedrooms up to $600 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything like that?
Right, sir. We have... just give me a moment, please.
Mm-hmm.
We have 2 properties that might interest you. One is in North Street. It's a very nice apartment, but it's £750 a month. But that includes a private parking space.
$750. That's a bit higher than I'd like to go, really. Do you have anything less expensive?
Yes. We have another one at £625 a month.
$625?
Mm-hmm.
All right, that sounds interesting. Where is it?
It's in Cornell Road, at number 12B.
I don't know that. How do you spell it?
It's Cornell. It's near the park.
I've never heard of it, but I'm sure I'll be able to find it on a map. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
So, would you like to see the apartment, sir?
Yes, I would. I'd like to rent somewhere fairly soon. Would tomorrow be possible?
Sorry, I'm afraid nobody is available all day tomorrow. It's quite a busy time of year for us.
I see.
But if you're free later today, you could see it at 5:15.
Sure, no problem. I could manage that.
OK. So that'll be 5:15 with my colleague Jason. He'll meet you at the apartment.
That's fine. And one more thing. What do I need to provide to rent an apartment with you? What documents, that kind of thing?
Yes, of course. Do you have a job?
Yes, I work in a travel agency.
Well, a reference letter from your employer, saying you work for them, and a deposit, which is 1 month's rent plus a fee of £60.
What's that for?
It's an administration fee to cover the cost of preparing the contract.
OK. And one last thing. When would this apartment be available?
It's empty now, so you could move in as soon as the contract was signed.
That's great. Thanks very much indeed. Bye.
Goodbye, Mr. Brown.
That is the end of Part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2.
Part 2.
You'll hear two teachers discussing a school trip. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Oh, there you are, Paul. Do you have a few minutes? Can we think about this year's school trip?
Hi, Jean. Yes, of course. Have you got any ideas?
I've been looking through some information, and I've brought a few leaflets with me. Here you are.
Okay, thanks. Just remind me when the trip is.
Next Friday. We'll be leaving at 9 and be back here at around 4, so we've probably got time to visit a couple of places. Let's see. What leaflet have you got there?
Central Gardens. Looks like a nice place. It's open from 9 until 6, so we could go there anytime we wanted, really. What about there in the morning and then somewhere else in the afternoon?
Farmers Market would be an option first as well, at least until they close at 1. Or we could try Grey Castle. That should be possible in the morning or in the afternoon. Oh, hang on. That's at the weekend. The last admission is at noon on weekdays. Greenhall says the same thing.
Queen's Park opens at 8, so we could go there first. Or, according to these times, we could go there on the way back to school, because they don't close the gates until sunset during the week.
Okay, that gives us a few options. We went to Queen's Park a couple of years ago, didn't we? I seem to remember that the pupils really enjoyed it. It'd be nice to go somewhere new as well. I've seen groups from other schools going around Grey Castle.
So have I. But then again, maybe we should play it safe and go to Green Hall. At least we've got experience of taking classes round there. Farmers Market is popular with other schools, though, so it must be interesting.
It'd be good to go somewhere where someone can show the pupils around, explain things to them. I've been on a tour around the castle, and they do a really good job. I think they have guides at the hall, too, don't they?
It says here that they used to, but don't anymore. You can get shown round Central Gardens, though. I think we'd have to do any explaining if we took the pupils to the market or the park. That wouldn't be a problem, though.
No, and at least those two would be free, wouldn't they? I think all the others charge, and we'd have to get the parents to pay some money.
I'm sure they wouldn't mind paying if it was a small amount. Let me check the leaflets. There's a special price for large groups at Grey Castle. Oh, but you can get into Central Gardens for nothing.
Right. Oh, I've just thought of something. We wouldn't need to book anything if we were going to Queen's Park, but what about the other places?
Central Gardens say you need to let them know if there are more than 10 people in your group, which would include us. The same at Grey Castle. Farmers Market says you can just turn up, and so does Green Hall.
Right. Well, I suggest we take the pupils to Grey Castle for a tour in the morning. How does that sound?
Yes, sounds good. We should contact them to book it as soon as possible. In the afternoon, we can do something a bit more relaxed at the park, and we'll have to think about going to Green Hall another year. Shame Farmers Market isn't open, but we can't change the day.
So that's a decision then. Now, let's think about what we're going to get the pupils to do. It's a school trip, after all, and we should give them some work to do.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
I think they should know something about the place before they go. That way they know what they're looking at, and they'll be able to write about it better when they get back. I'll put some information together to look at home and give them copies after the next lesson.
Good idea. I'll write something for them to do as they're going round the place. We did a quiz last year, and that worked really well. I'll do the same kind of thing this time.
Okay. Now, what about the travel arrangements? How are we getting there?
What do you think? I remember one year Mrs. Jackson took her group by bus, and that was a complete nightmare.
It's quite a long way, isn't it? We could hire a coach for the day, which is what we usually do, or there's the train.
It's rush hour, though, isn't it? So it'll be really crowded. And it'll be more convenient for the rest of the day if we've got our own transport.
Yes, we'll do that then. Anything else?
Oh, we need to let the parents know what's happening. We could ask the office to call everyone.
It would take too long with so many. I know when we send a letter home, there are always a few pupils who lose it, but not all the parents have email yet, so I don't think we have any choice, really. I'll write something and take it to the school office this afternoon.
Right. I'll go and tell the pupils the good news.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
You are going to hear a conversation on rivers. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen to the tape and answer the questions.
Please tell me about the current state of the Amazon.
We have increased deforestation, increased human population relating to deforestation, and a role of fire in the Amazon on a scale that's never been seen in history. At the same time, you can see progress in trying to counter that negative trend.
How do you see this?
We see this in the creation of national parks and indigenous areas, and efforts to fund sustainable development activities for locals. We see both good and the bad, and it's going to be a race to finish.
I understand that you started the Minimum Critical Size of Ecosystems project. Could you tell me about it?
A number of years ago, it became apparent that those practicing conservationists didn't have the scientific information available to properly design a conservation area.
They didn't know how big it had to be, right?
People were learning that as forests fragment, the fragments begin to shed species after they become isolated, so they end up becoming poor examples of what they had been. This relates to the size of the fragment.
Do people still study this?
Yes, there is a rich subfield of conservation biology that looks at the efforts of fragmentation. One of the consequences is a general policy response to set up protected areas that are fairly large, something on the order of 1,000 square kilometres.
Now look at questions 26 to 30. As the talk continues, answer questions 26 to 30.
Can you talk a little bit more about the forest fragmentation?
As habitats are destroyed, they are accompanied by habitat fragmentation. So when 50% of a forest is lost, the remaining 50% being is not one large block, but smaller pieces, which makes the conservation problem even worse than saying that 50% has been lost.
And this affects not just forest, but species diversity, correct?
In terms of species loss, we can't give you precise numbers about how many species are lost because of these fragmented landscapes, but we're beginning to get close to where we can make that estimation. And so one of the policy responses to all of this, beyond just trying to create large protected areas, is to try and reconnect the fragments.
You've been active in many projects studying the Amazon region over the years. Can you tell us about that process of understanding the Amazon?
When people first started looking at conservation priorities, there was not much information about the geography of plant and animal species. One of the first clues was an analysis done in 1969. This looked at bird species and found geographic clusters of species which occurred nowhere else. And those are priority areas for conservation.
Was this when people began prioritizing refuges?
Yes, it was the first time that someone looked basin-wide at priorities, giving priority to so-called refugean areas.
Was this when the new trend to use geographic information systems, or a GIS, started?
That was in 1990 after we worked out a whole set of biological and conservational priorities and produced a big map using GIS.
What are some of the things that GIS does?
Well, there are several advantages of using a geographic information system. First, you can continually update the system so that it's now a constantly changing picture. You can actually watch changes. Then you can include large amounts of data, including information about the vectors of development. Roads, railroads, pipelines, hydroelectric projects, etc. And finally, because it is accessible on the internet, it makes this information available to anyone who's interested.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today I'm going to talk about the city of Barcelona and its architecture. First, the city. Barcelona is a city of some 1.5 million people. It is a port situated on the northeast coast of Spain in the province of Catalonia. The people speak Catalan as their native language, but most are also fluent in Castilian Spanish and some speak English too. The city centre is surrounded by a ring road which encloses a grid with 2 major roads running diagonally across it. These are the Avenidas Diagonal and Meridiana. Probably the most famous street in Barcelona is La Rambla, which connects the Placa de Catalunya in the town centre to the statue of Columbus on the water's edge. All along the centre of this wide boulevard are stalls selling flowers and artistic works. Barcelona was founded by the Carthaginians from modern-day Tunisia in North Africa. It grew under the influence of the Roman Empire, later becoming the capital of Spain. Under strong government, it expanded its trade, exporting cloth to other Mediterranean ports and establishing itself as a financial centre. It went into decline after 1400, and in 1640 it was the centre of the Catalan Revolution against King Philip IV of Spain. Now it is considered by many to be the cultural centre of Spain, and the Olympic Games were held there in 1992. Now to the architecture. Throughout the city there are many fine buildings, churches, cathedrals, markets and squares, which date back to the 13th century. One very fine square, which can be entered from La Rambla, is the Placa Real, or Royal Square. This was built by Molina in the 19th century. 7 narrow passages lead into a large central area, which is surrounded by 2-storey buildings. Most of the ground floor is occupied by restaurants and bars, and it is traditionally a place of music and entertainment. It is impossible to talk about the architecture of Barcelona without mentioning Gaudí, who dominated the scene from the 1880s until his death in 1926. His style was unique, a decorative form of Art Nouveau, the style of the 1920s and 30s in Europe. It was based on organic natural forms, which often seem to defy the qualities of the materials they are made from. I will mention just 3 of his best-known works today. The first is Güell Palace. This was built for the Count of Güell, one of Gaudí's main supporters. The building features 2 arched gates, which lead into the stable area. Inside are 2 circular staircases, one for people and the other for horses. The ground floor is built of brick, but there is also much natural stone used in the construction. The roof is quite fantastic, with brightly coloured sculptures built around the chimneys and ventilation shafts. Another project commissioned by Güell is the park named after him. This was meant to be a garden city with 50 houses, but in fact only 2 were ever finished. The influence of nature is strong in the cave-like spaces and animal figures, and again, much use has been made of brilliantly coloured surfaces. But the greatest of Gaudí's works is still under construction, and it is not expected to be finished until 2041. He began work on this cathedral, known as La Sagrada Familia, Church of the Holy Family, in 1882, which means that it will have taken 159 years to complete. The finished building will have 18 towers, the highest being 170 metres high. The building will be 95 metres long by 60 metres wide, and it will hold 13,000 people, a truly impressive monument to Gaudí's great genius. And that's all we have time for today. Next week, we'll look at some of Gaudí's smaller projects and also his furniture designs. Please make sure that you complete your assignment on Le Corbusier by this coming Friday.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
I thought I had it figured out, believed in us, we were meant to be, no doubt. A teenage love, everybody else could see the way we were, living in a fantasy. When I